would have a set of, let's say, 400 sheets, 500 sheets for these massive semi-trailers, right? Refrigerated, dry freight, whatever it may be. Somewhat simple products. But just like in construction, in a manufacturing facility, there'd be RFIs in the drawings, there'd be questions about the design intent. And what would happen is we would actually lock up the drawing. And basically, as soon as we were doing any type of manipulation to the model, that individual set of sheets within the entire bill of materials would be flagged as under review or currently being revised. So anybody who would go to access that drawing would also be alerted that, hey, this drawing is no longer fresh anymore. But since we had control of the entire distribution network, everybody was forced to look at drawings on the same platform, which is where we're not able to have that same leverage. So it's just a thought I'd share. This is a very interesting topic.
It's awesome. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Nathan, I think that's time for us, right?
It is. Yeah, we're back in the main session. Everybody is back. We took our group photo and welcoming back. So again, since our last meeting, got a couple new members on board. Excited to bring in Felipe Engineer Manriquez with the Easier, Better for Construction EBFC show. If you're from the lean world, you probably, I'm sure, have come across Felipe. Had a great conversation with him recently. I'll be putting that link in the chat to our podcast conversation. But those looking to learn more about lean and specifically Scrum, a lot of what we're doing with CDX in these conversations are Scrum and Agile based. And that's a lot of what Felipe focuses on, bringing that to the construction industry, really pioneered bringing Scrum to the construction industry. So welcome, Felipe. And then our other new member, we want to welcome Merritt, is here. I just had a great conversation with her last week. And I actually saw that she had a great interview with Hugh on the constructed future. So I'll put that link in our chat as well in a second here. Excited to learn more about her background in the contract side of the world, which so many of our conversations do come back to contracts, and how we're using data and technology to address those contract risks. So welcome, Merritt. And again, just as a reminder, thank you to everyone who continues to support and push these conversations along. I know it feels like we've been having them for years or going on decades here pretty soon, but it is important that we continue to move these forward as a group, so you can learn more about all the rest of our members on the website that I will put in the chat shortly. But without further ado, let's dig into our discussion recaps. We are going to start with our breakouts and then finish with the general session. So our first breakout was the mental health breakout on Back to Normal-ish with Chad Pearson and Jeff Sample. I know Brent and other folks were in there really looking at the neuroscience of breaking down individuals, team, and organizational efficiencies and really just health in general. And again, looking at how we can improve those. So without further ado, Chad, why don't you tell us what you guys talked about?
oh man.
I'm excited for that recording. I didn't spend any time. I'm excited to listen.
No, man, it was funny. It was like making the transition normal-ish.
And Chad, if you can, because I don't have it up, the what was it, Darcy's document that everyone should use. I know there were some really great tips for reentering the workplace from a mental health standpoint. Which on that same point, so if you did miss it or just forgot to go back to YouTube and watch it, the mental health webinar / roundtable from last month, Grit to Great, that Sasha led with a lot of the same folks you see here, was a very, very powerful conversation. Definitely go on and check that out. And along those lines, there's actually even more content on the CPC Connect. The conversation that Chad had with Nick on Nemawashe and that importance was one that was captured in blog format for those who'd rather read than listen to an hour conversation. And I had to pull up this video of Chad because I love the graphics of how you really bring the interaction of these video tutorials, but we'll put the link in there as well for some great content there that Plex is putting out. That is, some that you'll see getting shared in our mental health roundtables. But if you really want to dive deep into what they're doing internally, thank you, Chad, for making that stuff public, because I know it's super valuable stuff. All right, so moving on to supply chain with MEP and the fabrication components. I know Kelly was leading this discussion with a lot of seasoned MEP folks, as well as fabrication parts through Victaulic, and then engineer perspectives around, looking at, again, the role of BIM as that kind of container for data across the supply chain, and how can we build more trust between engineers, fabricators, contractors, everybody that kind of touches that data. So Kelly, do you want to tell us a little bit of what happened in your discussion?
Yeah, it was actually a great opportunity to have different voices in the room who were really, everybody has the same focus, the same desire to drive some standards so that everybody can be more efficient. Now, I'll tell you that there's a common thread between my usual digital twin conversation, our latest project, Universal Project ID conversation, and this conversation. It's the old candy in the wrapper, right? Who is really driving it? Who's going to make it happen? Who's going to run the standards? Everybody agrees it needs to happen, but it shouldn't happen with somebody who has to make a penny at it, or $1 or $5, because that's what ruins the whole process, right? So we got some history about it. We talked about who needs to be at the table, and it was interesting to hear everybody's perspective. We spent a fair amount of time trying to determine what's going to drive it, right? Is it the owners that are going to say we require that you use prefabrication, which is going to make the shops have to spin up more quality in there to meet that, to buy from manufacturers that create that product within those tolerances, or is it the contractors? It was all back and forth all over the place. It was great conversation around that, and I think there's a lot of motivation to advance this idea forward. As usual, probably more questions came out of it than answers, but it was a great conversation. Definitely worth watching. Check out the YouTube post.
Awesome. Great. Thank you so much. Let me pull my screen back up. Okay, upcoming events. So we talked about last time the BIM Coordinator Summit. That's coming up next week, October 28th. Lots of folks signed up for that. Should be a big international crowd. Same thing with the Future Infrastructure Summit. I'll put a link in there for free registration to that. Anil and Jeffrey and I will be speaking on U.S. perspective on infrastructure, global infrastructure standards. There's also a great webinar coming up on November 4th that Procore's putting together with New Metrics and AXA about really putting that data to work, and a lot of these concepts of, sorry, once we do have the data, what can we do with it? And then last is the Current Technology and Productivity Summit. A good number of folks on this call will be down in Florida on November 10th for that meeting, and that is open to non-CURT members if you do want to come down and sign up for that. So we'll put that link in the chat as well. One person that will be at that, among many other places, is our friend Paul Doherty. So for those of you who are not old enough or too old to know where in the world is Carmen Sandiego, you didn't get the joke, and I don't care. But Paul is going all over the place and spreading the good word about CPC efforts, about the use case for blockchain, this concept of a universal project ID, and really will be gathering, I think, some good insights from both national and international perspectives. So great to see that we are disseminating this information out and spreading the word. So thank you, Paul, for doing that. All right, so next up is reality capture. I know Brianna led the discussion along with Dustin. We had Owens Corning and USIBD perspectives talking about really that owner's deliverable requirement when it comes to reality capture. How do we kind of intersect the needs of the owner from a deliverable standpoint with what is sort of the most cost-effective way to deliver that to them? Knowing that we're talking to those that actually provide those laser scanning services or other others in general. So without further ado, Dustin, you want to tell us what you guys covered in the discussion?
Sure. We had a ton of insights. I'd say I'd really recommend everyone taking a listen to it. We talked about it, basically, the use case of what Owens Corning is doing, and then we also talked about where things are currently. So, we had a ton of collective knowledge in there, a lot of different perspectives. We're working with Kurt, as you mentioned, USIBD, and everyone was really collaboratively speaking about their unique perspectives. So there was a lot of talk about, it was all about owner requirements and how it gets approached, and how there's some standards that people are using to dictate what they want to receive. We talked about using a specification that it tells people what they want out of the project, as opposed to what technology they want used, so that they can get the result they're looking for. There was towards the end, we did talk about the trust and using the data as a tool to advance the project, as opposed to waiting until there's fires on the project and trying to put those fires out and be the hero. And there was another big perspective towards the middle of the conversation about not assuming that owners already know what they want out of the process. So this decision-making that template that we're working towards is, I think, something that will be super beneficial from that perspective of educating. If you want this result, these are the types of things that you need to expect, and that being, the price and interoperability and all those ROIs.
Yeah,
I would totally recommend.
I was gonna say, yeah. What is the right level of understanding that an owner needs to have in order to make a good decision, right? Because they don't need to be an expert, obviously. That's why they're the owner, but they need to know enough to be dangerous.
On our way. Yeah, it's just like what we saw with BIM, 10 years ago, where they're asking for BIM, but they're not getting specific about LOD, or making up stuff that aren't really standards. And I think we're in a better spot to understand those trends and where that heads. And in the past, that's headed toward owners writing their own requirements and asking for the world, and sort of pulling back a little bit when they start to get a better understanding. And we're seeing that happen right now with the reality capture, where different jurisdictions are creating their own reality capture requirements. So now's the time to come together and really understand where the use cases are and what the benefits are and who gains that benefit.
I just thought of this, Josh. We're gonna have to create a t-shirt for the group that's LOA is the new LOD. But I digress. And thank you, Neil, for putting that in the chat. I know we shared that on social, and I forgot to include in our slides that there is an RICS survey on digital twins. So those that, especially from the US perspective, I know they get a lot of European and other perspectives. So good to make sure we get some US perspective on those. But continuing on, so update on some new podcasts have come out that are worth checking out as well, and all this infinite drive time that we now have because we're commuting to work. But some great Construction Dorks episodes, especially the conversation, speaking of this, kind of new normal or normal-ish, that we had a great discussion with Todd, myself, and the Dorks, diving deep. So definitely want to check that one out on your favorite podcast app. Construction Futures, again, I feel like my new litmus test for industry credibility is, do you have a interview with Hugh Seaton on his podcast? Because he's really cranking up some great folks. Like Ray Levitt is an awesome perspective and great mind with a lot of history in this industry from Stanford, as well as looking at contracts and really taking a technology and a data look at things like consensus docs. I know Brian well, and that was a great conversation, as well as, of course, the job site documentation, how those things are changing with the reality capture. And those who don't know, Matt Daly with Construction Site, great guy and great conversation there. So do check those out on the Constructed Futures podcast. And then some of you may have seen a recent report that came out from Autodesk, really trying to, and again, it's not easy to do. And I've seen some things on Twitter where maybe Autodesk, or not Autodesk, but probably FMI really got called out for making some assumptions on some numbers that can get us all into trouble, because we're trying to use data to tell a story, right? But long story short, there's a great conversation here. It kind of talks about what's in that report, and that so much of this, we need to have the numbers to help us have the conversation. So, thank you to Autodesk for investing and partnering with folks like FMI to do the research and create that data so that we can have these conversations. That's really where it starts. And then, of course, bridging the gap, always rolling out great episodes. One of the one recently that I thought was particularly good was the Curious Case of People and Innovation with Jennifer Byrne from Microsoft. Very cool conversation, but a ton of great episodes if you haven't checked out Bridging the Gap, and Todd, who hosts that. So our final topic, digitalization, not digitization, of drawing the issue sets. Carol led this discussion with Rachel and Miles and Rob and DJ, and had a great kind of back and forth discussion around the opportunities to get away from this digital to analog to digital and starting to move towards a truly digital to digital exchange. Carol, why don't you go ahead and tell us what you guys talked about and what came out of it?
Sure. Yeah, it was a great discussion, actually. It was, fortunately for me, as my first time moderating for the CPC, this was awesome because everybody jumped in. It was amazing. It was quite eye-opening, actually. But there were 4 words essentially that stood out for me, and that was trust, review, large data, and accountability. And that seems to be what the theme around this whole discussion was about. So, Rob walked us through how, the drawings are received and how he verifies them, and then, they move them along, how the drawings are actually released and the information that's contained within, and so on. So, I don't want to get into a whole lot of detail, but there was, from the audience, actually, the word accountability came up, and that was a big point that we really didn't discuss in the 5 to 6 weeks building up to it, but obviously is definitely worthy of the hashtag shared pains moniker for sure. So there was some great conversation around the movement of that data, and the flow of it, and what makes sense, what doesn't, where does it come off the rails in terms of, they're in the digital world, and then boom, they decide to go back to old school because that's what they know and that's what they do. So it just made it a lot easier to deal with at that stage. So there's still a lot of work to do. There's still a lot of questions. Actually, I'm going to echo, I think it was Kelly that said there were way more questions than the answers that came up. And that's exactly the kind of conversation that we were involved in. Without getting into too many details, like I said, the 30,000 foot view were really those 4 words that that really highlighted for me anyway.
Awesome.
Did I miss anything,
No,
Nathan?
I think you captured it well. I know. I thought that was absolutely right. And once I can figure out how to share my screen back here, we'll get going and get everyone out of here. Obviously, nobody could have been in all the sessions at once. So if one did pique your interest, you want to dive deeper, go ahead and subscribe to the YouTube channel so that you can be notified when those do get posted, and go check them out. Also topics too. These topics come up through discussions, through it, sometimes just off the top of my head, but usually because someone has brought an idea, and kind of we'll test it and see if it has any legs. And a lot of these initiatives have been going for multiple years now because someone just said, hey, I'm interested in this. So however you want to do it, whether formally on the website or just shoot me an email, whatever. If you've got a topic that you're interested in, do let me know. We can figure out how it fits within sort of this CDX initiative framework. And along those lines, what you saw really in at least 3 of our discussions around the whether it's the governance around drawings or RFIs or submittals, or this MEP fabrication and BIM supply chain discussion, or this reality capture use case decision guide. I think all 3 of these are kind of within our proposed topic list for what will be up to 10 topics and 100 participants together in Denver, February 23rd, 24th. To Chad's point, there's nothing that that you can really exchange for that in-person collaboration, really diving deep into these topics that we're all knowledgeable about. But if we can be structured with about a day and a half chunk of time, what can we really leave with, what recommendations, action items, knowing that we're not going to solve it in the day and a half, but we can come up with a really good roadmap of, what do we agree on and where do we need to go as far as getting others involved. So plenty more information to come in future roundtables, future updates, future emails. The formal registration will be going out next week for folks to start signing up. We've already gotten really good, positive, almost 60% attendance feedback from delegate responses, and we'll have the ability for non-delegates to participate as well. So again, ask questions if you have them, or stay tuned for more information as we learn to get that going. So that is it for this one. We are going to take off in Thanksgiving and do some of this planning stuff for the summit. We will do another roundtable in December. So stay tuned as we send out the hold invite and put that on LinkedIn for folks to sign up there. And again, I just want to thank all of our moderators. I know the time and stress and last minute to get these conversations together, but just by showing how many folks sign up and participate in these discussions goes to show the value that we're all getting out of it. So thank you all. And we will talk again in about a month and a half.
Thanks, Nathan.
Thanks,
Thanks,
guys.
everyone. Thank you, Rachel.
Bye.
Cheers.
Bye.
Thank you.